That is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Washington, D.C. She's signing the articles of impeachment which the House has voted on sending to the Senate, essentially kicking off the Senate trial of the impeachment charges against President Donald Trump. Let's dig into what all of this means and what that process looks like going forward with two journalists south of the border. I'm joined now by Aaron Blake, senior political reporter with The Washington Post, and Todd Zwillich, host of 1A on NPR. Hi, both of you. Nice to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Good to be with you.
Aaron, why don't I start with you? Because for those of us north of the border, this isn't a sight we're used to seeing. I know you're not used to seeing it. It hasn't happened that many times either in Washington. But what is the significance of what we're witnessing right now? And our viewers are watching it unfold right next to you.
Yeah, well, basically, this is kind of a pageantry. This is a procession. This is meant to kind of reflect the gravity of the situation. Basically, the Democrats who are responsible for managing this impeachment will now walk these articles physically across the Capitol from the House side where the president has been impeached, through the Capitol Rotunda, and to the Senate side where they will actually deliver those articles directly to the Senate chamber. At that point, the Senate needs to acknowledge the receipt in some way. It's going to be a little bit different, though, than we've seen before. Back in 1999, the Republican House was delivering these articles to a Republican Senate. In this case, the Democratic House is going to be delivering it to a Republican Senate who is on the side of the president. And so I think you saw House Speaker Nancy Pelosi acknowledge that she didn't really know how the Senate was going to deal with some of these things. There haven't been many negotiations over these processes because the two sides are a little bit at odds. And so really that's when the law of unintended consequences begins.
Todd, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because in the precursor to this event today, there had been much discussion around how long the Democrats were going to wait for this moment to send it to the Senate. Why did they wait as long as they did, and did they get what they wanted by doing so?
Well, this call was really the Speaker's, Nancy Pelosi. She had her House Democrats vote to impeach and then held on to those articles until this moment where she's actually transmitting them. So then the question was, why is she holding them? What's the leverage she's seeking? One of the things that Nancy Pelosi wanted was she wanted Mitch McConnell and the Republicans to telegraph or announce what the rules of the road would be for the trial in the Senate. One thing you have to know is that the Constitution gives the Senate the sole power for this trial. They can make their own rules. They can make them however they want. They do want to have some appearance of fairness, but even then, Mitch McConnell, as recently as about a week and a half ago, was going on television proudly announcing that he was coordinating with the White House counsel and was firmly in the camp of the president. That was a curious statement from the leader of the Senate, where they're technically supposed to be something akin to jurors in this case. Did it do any good? A lot of people were observing that Pelosi didn't have any leverage in this case, but then look at the last week or so as she's held on to these impeachment articles. There's been more news. A steady drip, drip, drip of additional facts have come out around the president, around his people, that concern this case. There were leaked emails about a week ago from the Pentagon showing that Pentagon functionaries and lawyers were very, very concerned when the White House held up money for Ukraine at the crux of this case, were worried that it was illegal, and that White House personnel put the decision to withhold the money directly on the president. An email saying comes directly from POTUS. That's an important fact. And then, of course, this week, new text messages and photos from one of Rudy Giuliani's indicted associates in this case, a man named Lev Parnas, an American who was born in the Soviet Union, indicted for campaign finance violations and illegally financing, trying to influence politics in order to get a U.S. ambassador fired. Text messages between him and other people, including text messages that seem to suggest that people had our ambassador in Ukraine under surveillance while she was being run out of town by Rudy Giuliani and others in the State Department who wanted her fired around this case. So what did Nancy Pelosi get out of it? A drip, drip, drip of more facts, and now more pressure on Senate Republicans. Look, we don't know the actual rules of the trial, but what's going to determine how this goes forward is how many Republicans feel pressure to call witnesses or potential additional evidence, and this has allowed time for some of that to come out, and I'm willing to predict that there will be more before the end of the trial.
Yeah, Aaron, I wanted to ask you about whether or not your assessment is similar. Has the drip, drip, drip had an effect, applied additional pressure on Senate Republicans, and what are the chances that any of them actually turn? Because at least publicly or outwardly facing, all we see are clips of Republicans who deny or are basically supporting President Trump.
Well, how this breaks down is this is basically going to come down to 4 Republicans. Senator Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins. These are the more kind of moderate people who aren't necessarily as aligned with the president on these things. And then they need to get a 4th Republican, who we really don't know who that might be, in order to vote with Democrats if they are going to admit any of the Democratic desired witnesses, if they are even going to admit any new evidence into this case. Some of these new documents from Lev Parnas, those won't get included in this case unless we get 4 Republicans to actually vote for them. So starting tonight, really, the focus is going to be on those 4 Republicans. And I think that we're seeing at least some mixed signals, I would say, on that count. Susan Collins is maybe the most moderate Senate Republican from Maine. She's up for re-election. She has voted against the president occasionally. She was asked about these new documents from Lev Parnas and kind of dismissed them, suggesting that the House probably should have gotten these things before impeaching the president. They could have conducted a longer investigation, which is certainly true, but I think it maybe tips the hand a little bit here that there is going to be some resistance, even among these moderate Republican senators, to just let a whole bunch of new evidence be allowed in this case. And so that is really the central fight now, that this is in the hands of the Republicans, because Democrats really have no control over it anymore.
Todd, as both you and Aaron mentioned, we don't know what the rules are going to be. The Republicans in the Senate have not outlined them. What do we know about the way in which this will unfold in the Senate? Like, what should we be watching for?
We don't know the verbatim rules, but we have a pretty good idea how this will unfold, because Mitch McConnell has said it will likely be similar to what we saw in 1999 when Bill Clinton was impeached. So you will have 100 senators in their seats. Think of them as jurors, if you like. You will have House impeachment managers. Nancy Pelosi's been surrounding herself with them today. Think of them as prosecutors who will come and prosecute the case against the president on these 2 articles of impeachment. You will have Republican impeachment managers. They are like defense lawyers. The president will have the ability to provide defense attorneys to plead his case in front of the Senate as well. Could go on a week and a half, could go on 2 weeks. We'll see what the pressure is like back home for these 4, maybe more senators that Aaron mentioned, whether they feel compelled at the end of this. Look, Mitch McConnell can't unilaterally control the rules. 51 votes, that's the key here. If 4 senators make 51, they say, we want to hear former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who says he's willing to testify. We want to hear from somebody else. Then they have to call him. And McConnell's refrain here on witnesses so far has been something like this. Well, the Democrats' case can't be so strong that the president has to be kicked out of office, but so weak that they have to scurry for witnesses. That's sort of his message going into this, that you should have thought of this before. I will say that does sort of skirt one of the key facts going on here. It skirts one of the articles of impeachment, which is obstruction of Congress. The fact that the witnesses that House Democrats wanted to call in the first place were almost uniformly blocked by the White House. The fact witnesses, the eyewitnesses to the behavior, were not allowed to testify. So to the extent that Democrats would like to fish, or at least get John Bolton on the hook, that's why they feel and they have charged the president with obstructing Congress here.
I just have a few seconds left, Aaron. Final question to you. How much public access will there be to what goes on in the Senate, and how much, what is your gauge of the level of public interest at this juncture?
Yeah, there's actually some fighting over how much access the press has to certain aspects of it. I think we're going to see, generally speaking, a pretty open process. It's not going to be like the Supreme Court, where they don't allow cameras in and we can't actually see what's happening here. It will be must-see TV for people who are tuned into this. A lot of people are already decided, of course, but certainly new evidence could always come into play. New witnesses could shed light. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much to both of you. Really appreciate your time this evening. Aaron Blake, senior political reporter with The Washington Post, and Todd Zwillich of NPR. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.